I think it's a good day to address some of the mistakes that I made in my first day milling. As to be expected, I think, you know. I'm not perfect. Luckily, there's a lot of nice people that are willing to offer their advice in the comments section below these videos. And I will say with certainty, the number one comment, the resounding piece of advice that I received was that my bunks are backwards in relation to the direction that the mill is cutting. I have the log stops on this side, and the mill head cuts towards the drive wheel, which, if you notice, the engine drives this wheel over here, and of course this side is the follower, which means that as this blade cuts, it's driving the log that way towards my pile. So when I have, sorry, I got my stopper here. Actually, let's pause for a second. How do you keep your mill from just freewheeling down the tracks and on a windy day, you know? All I have is to put a board between the first bunk and the saw head. I'm curious what the pros do. I'm sure that there's a wonderful solution to that problem. Let me know in the comments. I'd appreciate it. Back to the mistakes I made the other day. My log stops are on this side, and the blade is cutting that way. So as I'm going through it, the blade tearing through the wood that way is wanting to pull my log away from the stop, as opposed to if I had just done it correctly, it would be driving the log into the stops. So first order of business is to get these bunks flipped around. Now the alternative would be to have the head facing the other way, but I want my head stashed towards the shed because this will have a little roof over it someday. And this is my utility side, you know. I have toolboxes over here. I've got everything right there. And the grade is a lot more friendly over here. You know, the track is basically at waist height off the end down there. And that would be a hassle, to say the least. So I want the mill head down here cutting towards you, which means these bunks need to all get spun around. But here's the reason that I put it backwards on purpose, which sounds funny to say that I did it wrong on purpose, but the winch post goes in these stops. And when I'm, you know, pulling up a log, I'm winching from this side and pulling it in. So I need one of these to be facing this way, which means I have a lot of nuts and bolts to take out, spin these around, put them back in, and then also the log clamps need to be switched in the opposite direction. I appreciate everyone letting me know. It was pretty obvious to anyone with experience that I had done that incorrectly. I got to learn from that one. I'm going to get these flipped around the correct way. So I got a lot of nuts and bolts to take out, put all those nuts and bolts back in. Well, I'm glad that's done. This, by the way, is probably one of the cheapest things I've ever bought. $4 from Harbor Freight, a kneeling pad. My gosh, this is, for a $4 thing, is probably one of the most valuable things that I have. Just throwing that out there. Kneeling pads are where it's at. So now here we are. I've got all those flipped around. That was 28 nuts and bolts, if you were curious how many. So now I have you here at the site of my second mistake. And I've got you in a position where you can see what I'm talking about. I've got my log clamp here. It's too far towards the cutting head. But if you look at the logs at the front end where I'm at and the tail end down there, you can see that this is far too forward. So by the time I got to the other end, the end of the log was a little squirrely. It didn't have near the same clamping force as down here. If I would have just stopped and looked at my log pile, I think common sense would have told me that it needs to be in the next bay over. So I'm going to get these 4 bolts out, and then we'll just get this flipped over to that side there, and that'll be a done deal. So now that we've got that switched over there, I'm going to say mistake 2 has been wiped off the board. And on to my third mistake, I guess I would just call it impatience. And that would be not getting the mill bolted down to the platform before I started cutting. I know a lot of people run like that where it's just gravity holding it down, but I guess my fear is that the mill, it's my anchor point for my winch. You know, I'm pulling logs with the mill, and if I get hung up on something and I'm cranking, there's a chance that the mill could just scoot sideways as opposed to pulling the log. And I know that, and I bought fasteners. I've got 1.5 inch long, 1/4 inch stainless steel lag screws that I'm going to put in the outside 2 holes of each feet. I don't know what Woodland Mill's suggestion for bolting these feet down are, but it's really difficult to do underneath of the track, but you can't really put them in before the track goes on either. So what I'm going to do is just put one on each side because that's the most accessible, and that is the reason I ended up putting these 2x6s on top. And I'm going to go through each of my log stop positions and make sure that the log stop will clear that 2x6 in the all the way down position because it's really close. Let's say I've got it up and I want to be done with it. I want that baby to just drop right down. And then it's going to be me and a 1/4 inch ratchet sending a whole bunch of these because it's just under the track to where I can't get my drill into it unless I go in at an angle. But I don't want a bunch of fasteners in there on a 45. That's just not the way. And then I will have a very secure anchor point to the platform, which is anchored into the concrete via those post brackets. So then when I'm winching, I'm pulling that log against this entire assembly as opposed to just the mill, which might slide sideways. I was impatient. I just wanted to get a log on here and start cutting. I think a lot of us have been in that position where you got a new toy and you just want to play with it, but I need to take a step back and finish what I started. Well, 36 lag screws later, my mill is officially anchored to the platform. That's something I should have done right away. I don't know that it affected me poorly sawing, but I'm sure there'll be less chattery vibration. And you know what, I was thinking while I was doing it, as I was sinking them, the last couple threads, it really pulls those feet, I mean, just tight into the platform. Now I'm looking back at the leveling that I did, that quick leveling before I milled those first slabs. How accurate was that really? I think whatever leveling I did was probably superficial, because if the feet aren't smushed pressed tight to the platform and I'm leveling and then I get the weight of a log on it and then I move the mill head across it, I have to imagine there was some sort of movement. I think not having those bolted tight was introducing a variance. I'm confident that now when I do level it again, it'll be much more true. And something I didn't do when I was looking in the book is that after leveling the track, you're supposed to take a tape measure and measure from this side of the blade to the bunk and this side of the blade to the bunk to see if the mill head is tracking correctly up and down as you crank it, and I didn't do that. And you can adjust that with the tension in the cables here in the back. The next step in my process, I'm going to get online, watch some more videos, and see what everybody's preferred technique is for leveling. And I know that flat is more important than level, but I'd really like to have both. Then I'll take the mill head and measure to make sure that my blade is parallel to the bunk with that adjustment in the back. I'm going to get the cover back on. I'm going to throw my wheel chock back in. And I'm serious. I'm going to be looking in the comments section for a solution to this. Is it like an eye bolt into the platform and some kind of a lanyard, like a cable with some carabiners? I don't know. I'm really hoping that somebody has already figured that out and they're going to be nice enough to let me know. So we'll pick this back up hopefully tomorrow. It is tomorrow and it's a beautiful day. The sun's shining, the birds are chirping, and it's time to get this track as flat and level as possible. This side is the most important to me, so I want this to be my true side, and I'll try and get that in to match this as well as I can. I'm going to do most of my cutting down here. I'll get my 4-foot level, and then we'll start working that way. Afterwards, we'll jump to the string line. Seems to be the preferred method. I know the laser beam would be more accurate, but it's just too bright for me to see a laser beam today. And if I can get that done in time, I think I'm going to try and get another log on here and mill my first cant. That went really well. It was so much different this time. with all the feet being so tightly and so strongly fastened. Now I could see when I was working the double nut there that it was, applying force to the track and getting it to go where it needed to be. I chased that bubble on the level just as tight as my eyeballs could register, and I'm actually surprised by how much better it rolls. I thought it was rolling quite well, but now it's like dangerously smooth, like with almost no effort. It just wants to go. So I think that I'll have to definitely be mindful of that. I can't just be working through a log and then, kick it backwards, because it's just going to sail right into that log stop. I'm definitely encouraged by how smooth it's rolling now. It was quite an improvement, and I didn't expect that. It makes sense though. So now I'm going to get a string line and a couple 3/4 inch blocks tied to each end, and I'll pull that sucker just as tight as I can, and we'll go down and stick a 3/4 block underneath the string on each bunk and see how that gap looks. These bunks were the hardest to level because there's 2 pads on each side, because this is a seam where the rails come together. So you're trying to level 4 feet instead of just 2.